Hi guys, it's Tiny Tom Logan back with another video for you. Now, I am feeling kind of rough. I should probably be in bed, but I've dosed myself up with paracetamol and I've had a coffee and I'm hoping I'm going to be able to get through this review without sweating out too much. Anyway, enough of the sympathy. No, can never get enough of the sympathy. Anyway, so I'm going to be taking a look today at the MSI B350 Tomahawk. Now, I haven't been sent any other B350 boards yet. Everyone's kind of pummeling me with X370 stuff. The X370 ones, they're not exactly the cheapest boards in the world, are they? Yet this one comes in at just £100. Now, it may not have any of all the spangly stuff on it, because it's only got red LEDs, as I'll show you in a bit, and it's only got one M.2, and you can't do SLI or crossfire. But if you're just looking for a board that you might later want to drop a Ryzen 5 or something in, at around £100, it seems quite good value for money. So we're going to drop our 1800X in it, stress the board to within an inch of its life, because let's face it, it's going to be feeding 8 cores and all that kind of stuff. But let's see how well it can perform. Now, if you're wondering about pictures and actually having a look at the board and all that kind of stuff, there's not really a great deal to show you. It's lovely, I can splash you some pictures up. It's quite understated, really, but you can go and have a look on the OC3D website, because I've put all the pictures and stuff there. I'm just trying to get this video smashed quickly so I can go back to bed. You can also, on the OC3D website, you can go and have a look at the comparisons with all the other boards as well, because we're testing all the boards with the 1800X, so you might be interested to see how a £100 board does against, let's face it, a £250 board. And there will soon be the £300 board, because I do have the X370 titanium, but I decided to do this one first. So we've been quite used to having a lot of RGB on boards lately, whereas this one just has the red LEDs. You've got all the other grey that I've said about before, but as you can see, with the way it's lit up, it's just, you've got a couple of bits around the back of the board. The activity lights are up here. This is what the red glow is. It's quite difficult to be able to get you to see it. There we go. So you've got some indicator lights up here. This is your CPU, your memory, your GPU. It's obviously having a heart attack at the moment because we don't have a GPU in. There's another small red lights up round the back as well. So they're scattered around the outside, around the top and down the side of the board. And then you've got the audio trail down here. This is, I took our test GPU, which is a 980 out, just so I could show you. Yes, we are still using a 980, but it's so that all the graphs and everything are comparable with even old stuff. If you really want to go back and dig through the OC3D website, that's why we do it. So it's relatively comparable across the ranges. So when it comes to testing, you may think it's a bit strange that we're using an 1800X, but at the time of making the video, we've obviously only had 3 processors of the Ryzen range through the doors, which is the 1700, 1700X and the 1800X. I am currently working on the 1700 review, but we've decided to stick with the 1800X throughout the motherboard reviews for the X370 and the B350, so that they are directly comparable. Because if I use a different CPU, they can't really go in the same graph, so I have to spend a lot of time explaining to you why that one's higher than that one and why this one might be slightly lower. The other thing to keep in mind is when I do talk to you about the graphs as well, the Asus Prime is the original, that's the board that we tested the 1800X on, and it was on quite an early BIOS, but it does give us quite a good indicator of the performance of the MSI, because with that early BIOS we were only able to get a 4 GHz overclock out of it, whereas with the slightly higher end boards and the newer BIOS, we were comfortably able to get 4.1 GHz. I bring that up because with this, on this board, I was only able to get 4 GHz out of it with what I would call sensible volts. And we used 1.4 volts, and that gave us a really simple 4 GHz overclock. To try and get 4.1 stable, it was turning into a bit of a nightmare, and we really were having to chase the volts up, and it was just getting to the point where temperatures were getting a little bit silly. Now the thing is with Ryzen, temperatures make a big difference. If you guys are trying to chase an overclock at home, turn your fan speed on max, because something I have noticed is you might have an unstable overclock at temperatures that you may think are okay, and then you turn the fan speeds up to 100% and it totally solves all your problems. So one thing that I am kind of seeing at the moment, especially with this board, is the overclocks are fairly temperature sensitive. So the other thing to think about is you've obviously got this weird XFR thing where with XFR CPU, so the 1800X and the 1700X, they've got that 20-degree offset. So what we're kind of saying is anything, once you get above 80 degrees with one of the X's, you need to start paying attention. And once they go above sort of like 85 or something, they start getting a bit shaky. Now, when you've got an overclock in place, that's going to be a very normal place for your CPU temperatures to be. Stock, maybe not so much, but you know, we won't go into those kind of things too much. Now, one of the things I will say is when I did test this, did test it with a lot of different memory. Now, one of the things I have to be very clear about, and it's something that's not been spoken about too much in reviews and in the press, is AMD have to do the memory qualifications at the moment. So the QVL for the memory is all down to AMD. What they have to do is test the memory and get the memory set up, and then they conjure up, however they do it, some kind of code that MSI and the other motherboard vendors then need to kind of transplant into the BIOS. So whereas with XMP, the motherboard manufacturers did all their own memory QVL, and it kind of sped up the process a little bit. So if you're having problems with memory on any of the brands at this present moment in time, make sure you keep up to date with your BIOS updates, because that's the memory is probably going to be the things that's going to be happening fairly thick and fast. So if you're moaning, oh, I can't get such and such a memory running on my MSI board and my other board, technically it's probably not their fault. It's actually probably AMD's fault at the moment. It's obviously going to kind of get better. Now, this can mean two things. Some memory kits won't even let the board start at all. Some other ones, they will run at stock, but then when you try to enable XMP as they've got on these, or DOCP as some of the other brands are starting to call it, if you try to enable it, it just then won't let you run. But one of the things I have to stress, try setting it up manually. It may seem like a daunting process to be able to go in and stick your memory timings in. You really need to think about the main four, sorry. So you'll have, for argument's sake, it might be 18, 18, 18, 34. They're the sort of numbers that you're looking for. And then your memory voltage needs to go on, and then you actually need to set it in the BIOS and tell it how fast you want it to run. Obviously the speed that you've bought. Don't try and put it above. Not yet anyway. If you're having to be told about this, then you don't want to be trying to put it above. But anyway, so if you can do that, then I have found that setting it up manually can actually get your kits running, which is what I did with this. Up to 3200 megahertz I wasn't having a problem with. There is a weird kind of glitch going on because MSI are doing this big thing called AXMP at the moment, which is their version of kind of AMD XMP rather than the DOCP, which is what AMD are actually calling it. Well, on the B350 board, it was. I think they do need to still do some more work on it. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is because if you get it now and you get it early, AXMP, give it a crack on your memory kit. If it doesn't work, do the manual thing that I did before, because it's quite clearly capable, where it's easily doing a 4 gigahertz overclock and 3200 megahertz memory at the same time and stable with decent volts. But the AXMP thing, it is something that they do need to work on, but because it's something that they're pushing so hard, and I've got the board so early, you might watch this a month after me actually putting the review live, and it may have already been 100% sorted. So just kind of keep that in mind. If you have problems and you're going on a boot loop after enabling AXMP, try manual. But the thing that you do need to look at is look at the QVL lists for the memory, because it does seem to be very hit and miss at the moment, and because of the reason it's hit and miss, it's because of AMD, not MSI. So you do kind of need to, it's almost like you have to give them a bit of breathing room, and you can't just like throw the blame straight away. But it's a B350 board, it doesn't really cost a great deal. It's not the full-blown X370, and we've still got a good solid 4 gigahertz overclock on the high-end 8-core processor with 3200 megahertz memory. I was actually incredibly happy with that. I think I would have been happy with a slightly lower overclock, to be fair, and the memory was pleasantly surprising. So it's kind of take with one hand, give in the other. But with these early days of something that's literally brand new, I'm not surprised. So it's definitely on the it's making me smile side of things, rather than making me go, oh God, this again. But the performance was actually, when it started to come through and we started to run the test, I was actually really happy with it. Don't forget what I said. Look at the X370 Prime, because they are the two boards in this graph that would have been running at 4 gigahertz. The other ones would have been running at 4.1, because obviously, you know, there's no point us testing at the same overclock. We want to stress and, you know, push things as hard as we can. So the Cinebench 15, as you can see here, actually went above the 370. At stock, maybe not so much. Stock is one of the places when, with a stock result, if it looks a little bit low, sometimes that can be BIOS. But there's not a great deal between it. There's not a great deal between any of them, to be fair. But the fact that it did manage to pull out a 27-point lead from the Asus probably has something to do with the fact it was running quicker memory, because the Asus would have just been 2933. But the fact it was in front at all, and the fact it was one of the lower end boards, blah blah blah. We've been through this, and then but with Cinebench R15, this is the single threaded, so this is just using one core on the processor. So on the bottom one, it's just going to have been stock. So XFR is going to be trying to have like ramped it up, and this is where it does get weird, and this is one of the reasons why I'm not completely sold with XFR. So XFR would have been going up to about 4.1 gigahertz, but it kind of goes up and down and moves all over the place, and it's not very stable. So with the XFR, it was all right. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't brilliant down the bottom, but the thing is look how much better it runs being at a static 4 gigahertz, even though it's still only using one core. So this is part of the reason why I'm still now, the more I dig into it, I'm not really that fussed about XFR, to the point I would say that you're probably better off having a fixed lower clock than letting that odd core go up and down, because it's a bit of a yo-yo. It may just need some refining, but that's my gut feelings at the minute. When we move on to X265, obviously like HVEC, re-encoding for 10-bit, all that sort of thing. You can go and see on the main OC3D website if you want to look for X264, and there are an awful lot of other benchmarks there as well. I'm only just putting a few into this video because, to be fair, I feel like death at the moment, and I'm just trying to make sure I get it done before I end up not being able to get out of bed in the morning because I've got sweat pouring from me. But anyway, so with this X265, it went in at second place. So it actually managed to beat the Gigabyte at a lower clock. They were running the same speed memory as well. So it just does go to show that there are some things that they're gradually working on. And I genuinely think with all the brands, as the BIOSes come out, the initial results that I've got on these graphs might even need to go back and be redone. I'll never have time to do it, but it's going to show BIOS progression quite well. So the fact that this jumped straight in second place with a lower clock is an absolute, it really is a really good sign. And then we go into gaming, it's pretty much the same thing as well. And don't forget, we use the same kit throughout. So the main kit, so the CPU and the graphics card, it's all kind of tied right in. And with games, you do get a difference between the boards when you really start to push the clocks in certain areas and stuff. But again, for this to have come ploughing straight in second place at a lower clock, again, it shows me that this is actually quite a bit better than that X370 Gaming 5, and that was quite a strong board. But I did say at the time, I didn't think the I didn't think the gaming performance, I didn't think it was quite right, and I did say that I think that they need to spend more time making sure that they get those things optimized correctly. And this one coming in at a lower price and with a lower clock just kind of confirms that. So when we go into a quick conclusion, because I can feel the sweat starting to build up, sympathy, you know, little tiny violin, hear it for me. Anyway, right, so this board, I didn't know what to expect because it's the first B350 I've tested. Now, I forgot to say rather, that when I was testing this, the voltages were actually brilliant. They weren't dancing all over the place like I have been getting with some of the other boards, because there's this weird thing with an offset that AMD have been trying to force people to use, and thankfully MSI have kind of ignored that, or at least with this BIOS revision, they've kind of ignored that. And it did mean that when I put 1.4 volts into the BIOS, the lowest I got without changing anything to do with the load line calibration, it dropped to 1.392. Now that, for not having to have touched anything, I was incredibly happy with. So the voltage stability on this board was pucker. And that then basically, because it wasn't, you know, like ramping itself up all over the place or, you know, dropping it right down, meant that it was really stable. It was doing what I asked it to do, which is the most critical thing. And it did help with that overclock. Because like you've seen, 4 gigahertz, it's actually done really well. And the thing I can't stress enough is if you do want to see more results, go and have a look on the OC3D website, because there's like 20 odd pages of tests there, and you can have a look at all the other Ryzen based boards that we've tested. So it's done really well. Now the thing that you do need to think about is it is B350, so you've got no multi-graphics and you've only got one M.2 slot. There's no RGB on it. But it's kind of gunmetal grey, it fits in kind of nicely, it's kind of understated. If the lights annoy you, turn them off. Although there's a lot of people out there that still like a bit of red. But to be honest with you, for the price, which is just over £100, it's an absolute blinder. We tested it with an 1800X, which I don't think you're going to spend £500 on an 1800X and then £100 on the board, because your kind of budget would be slightly skewed, and you know, you would need to be spending a little bit more if you were thinking about going up higher. Now, the one thing I will say though is we have to test with the 1800X because the Ryzen 5s haven't come out yet. But I think the Ryzen 5s are going to be perfect for this board. I think the B350s in general, yes, it's not the prettiest one that's out there, and that might be the kind of fly that sticks in your teeth that makes you decide not to get it, but it's certainly not going to be down to anything to do with performance, because it is thoroughly capable. And like I said, we've tested it with an 8 core and it's proven that it's really capable of that. So to be fair, if you were thinking of a 1700 with one of these, so that you can give it a bit of an overclock, set it up manually, it will do you proud. So the only thing really with the B350 boards is when you think about it, they're at a lower price point, and you might get slightly lower component specs, like with the MOSFETs and the caps and stuff around the actual power delivery. And you might not get some of the Gucci things on the board. But if you're not trying to break world records, and you know, you're not particularly worried about absolutely maxing out your CPU 24/7, it will do you absolutely proud. I personally think that something like this is going to be absolutely amazing. One of the 4-core or the 6-core Ryzen processors. Spend a little bit more money on your graphics card, because that's going to be where you're going to get most of your FPS from, and then you're going to be absolutely laughing. And like I said, with the fact that you can actually run 3200 megahertz memory on this, I do think well, I know that they're going to get the AXMP thing with a wider compatibility list. I've probably not got memory that's on the QVL list. I've not had one, but the fact that I could actually get 3200 megahertz running on it by doing it manually, which isn't that hard, and I tested it with quite a few different kits that I've got as well, and they were all the same, manual, smack, straight in. That for me was brilliant. The fact that you can actually put the memory in the board and it start is also another positive at the moment. You may not be aware of all this stuff, and you may think I'm being scaremongering, but I'm actually just trying to give you my experience with Ryzen so far, because memory does seem to be a bit of a tripping point with all the brands at the moment, and this, to be fair, was one of the easier ones. So you may think I'm being negative, I'm really not. I'm just trying to give you the information so that if you get it and you think you've got a problem, you might not actually in the end. So, award, 100% value for money, absolutely, and I really like it as well. I genuinely, basically this has made me now think, I know they're going to be doing a white one. I know there's a white Tomahawk coming. I want one of those. That's literally what it comes down to in the end. So if you're looking for a slightly more budget orientated board, I wouldn't really personally, if it was me, you're asking for my advice, you're watching my video, I wouldn't put a 1700X or an 1800X in this. 1700 would be the absolute top end that I'd be looking at to put in this. But if you're looking to jump on the Ryzen 5s, as one of the 6 or the 4 cores even, I would say it's an absolute match made in heaven. It's just the kind of board for someone that doesn't want all the extra bells and whistles which ramp the price up. It does it does all the basic tasks, and it does them really well, and you can overclock on it, and it does overclock pretty well as well. It's just, you've not got all those spangly bits on it that are going to end up costing you money. So if you like the spangly, you like the bling, you like all the shiny lights and all that sort of stuff, and being able to change them, you know, add loads and loads of extra things in the board, then it might not be the one for you. But if you're that guy that just wants to put a little bit of an overclock on it, run some quick memory, play your games and render your videos, and you don't really, you know, mind what else is going on, you know, with all lights and all that kind of stuff, then it could absolutely be perfect for you. So it's very much more give than take with this board. It gives you a lot more than it kind of, you know, takes your hair from you and all that sort of stuff. You get what I'm trying to say anyway. There's definitely a lot more good than there is bad. And to be fair, I reckon within the next kind of month, I don't think there's going to be a lot bad to say about it either. So anyway, hopefully you're understanding my angle with the balance on this one. I'm going to go and take a lot more paracetamol and get back into bed. But for now, this has been Tiny Tom Logan with the Value for Money Award winning MSI B350 Tomahawk out. Ding! That's the first time I've done a ding in ages.